Hello and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Over the past year, we've seen nationwide protests calling for an end to racial injustice and police brutality. But has anything really changed? Well, joining me to discuss these issues is Jody Armour.
Very good to be with you.
Yeah, so has anything changed?
In some ways, ain't nothing changed but what year it is. You know, I wrote a book about this in 1997. I talked about brutality at the front end with respect to police officers and at the back end with respect to the criminal justice jails and prison systems. Not much has changed in that intervening 20 plus years.
In terms of the LAPD, are they doing things right, in your opinion?
They're resisting the fundamental demand that's been made by the activists and protesters in the street that you heard coming out last summer, and that was to unbundle the police. We recognize that in this country, we've given the police too many tasks. We've saddled them with too many burdens, right? We've made them our street-level social workers. Rather than spending at the front end on care and concern for our citizens, providing affordable housing, affordable health care, and the like, we allow criminogenic conditions to fester. And then when crime comes out of those criminogenic conditions, which is very foreseeable, we make police our problem solvers. Yes. We send them in, and we make our jails the receptacles of our social failures. And so now the police are thrown in this nearly impossible position when we do that to them of trying to move our social failures. Every crime is a social policy failure, can be looked at that way, from the street to the jail cells. And they're creating a reservoir of resentment in the process between them and the communities that they police.
I mean, these are issues that are certainly not going to go away very, very soon. I mean, we've had these problems for decades.
We've had them for decades, and we have to say to ourselves now, the fact that we keep having these same problems for decades, we keep waking up to the same racial injustice Groundhog Day over and over again, is telling us that our old solutions aren't working, right? Maybe we need new solutions. Maybe our old understandings of the problems have been misguided, frankly, right?
A lot has changed in the past 6 months since President Trump left office. Do you think that there's a potential for race relations to get better now that we don't have someone in the White House talking about, you know, the Asian flu or Mexicans are rapists or LeBron James is dumb?
We may have, we may make a lot of progress, but we may not. It's easy to forget sometimes that in between 92 and 2000, we had one of an explosion in the new Jim Crow. We had more black bodies locked up, you know, between 92 and 2000 than 40 years before, 50 years before, right? Clinton came in with Joe Biden at the helm with harsher laws, the 94 crime bill, right? And before that, we had the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which over half the Congressional Black Caucus supported. So a lot of the folks, mass incarceration, racialized mass incarceration, the new Jim Crow, has been a bipartisan affair, right, for a long time, right? For both Republicans and Democrats have been pushing for the carceral state for 30 or 40 years, and now we're rethinking that.
Yeah.
Angelenos have brought in George Gascon, a progressive prosecutor. The Angelenos voted for Measure J, basically a defund the police measure, to 10% of the LA unrestricted budget, which is up to $1 billion a year, $10 billion overall, up to $1 billion a year.
Yeah, but there's already talk of recalling Gascon.
Right.
He just got in office.
Yeah, there's going to, what's more predictable than pushback? What's more predictable? There's going to be pushback and rear guard maneuvering, right, from the status quo. And if there wasn't, I would really then be worried. That's when I would worry, because then it would be like you're playing into something you're not even aware of being playing into. No, you expect that because we're talking about a revolution in consciousness that voters have led, right? Voters in California led with 3 strikes laws about 30 or 40 years ago. They led the nation, right? We were one of the most punitive states in the union. But over the last 7, 8 years, California has led the nation in going in the other direction. Proposition 47, taking all of these felonies down to misdemeanors. Proposition 57, legalizing marijuana. Voting in Chesa Boudin up in San Francisco. George Gascon down here. Measure J. The voters have led the politicians in a lot of ways.
Voters have, but crime is rising.
Yeah, but crime is crime goes up and down. You would expect crime to go up, wouldn't you, in a once-in-a-century pandemic when people have lost their jobs and are desperate, more desperate than ever before. They've already, many of them, been scratching out barely in existence, and now over the past year, we've caused even greater misery. Why would that be connected to the election of one DA who just got in 6 months ago?
He just got in, but I'm not going to put this crime on regular citizens. We're letting more folks out of prisons as a result of COVID and other issues, and that's a big factor.
But demonstrate that that's a factor in the rise in crime. That's the question. Does letting more folks out mean they cause the rise in crime? Or could something like COVID? Correlation is not causation, right? We have COVID sitting right here in the middle that's making any of our inferences noisy about causal connection. And what we are finding, there's some recent studies, for example, out of Boston University that found that actually arresting people for misdemeanors makes it more likely that they're going to do felonies down the road. So our broken windows approach to policing for so long has actually been counterproductive. So sometimes we have to question what seems like common sense and look at the facts, look at the data. What does it say? Follow the data and the information. And what it's all saying is that we are wasting a lot of resources on a bloated punishment bureaucracy. You know, police, jails, prisons. Police, when they spend 5% of their time responding to calls that could be in any way characterized as violent, 5%. That means 95% of their time is spent doing what? You know, exactly, right? All communities, a lot of communities, I can't think of a community that doesn't want murders and rapes solved in their community. Right? Every community wants that. But police are doing a horrible job at solving murders and rapes, right? And the clearance rate in a lot of cities is 35%, 40% or less, right? And that's because police are not solving those crimes. The clearance rate is going down.
So why do you say they're not solving those crimes? Is it because they're too focused on other issues like addressing, dealing with unhoused individuals and things like that?
Two things. Yes, one, going after turnstile jumpers and unhoused individuals and broken windows kind of policing kinds of things. That siphons off a lot of resources, number one. And then number two, over here, it's resource intensive to go after violent, to solve crimes. It takes a lot of woman and manpower. And so if that is going over in another direction, it can't be directed where it can do the most good for communities that are crying out for effective law enforcement. And so the other big problem is there's no community trust and confidence. The way you solve crimes is by having a trust and confidence relationship with community members who will help you solve those crimes, right? Yeah. But if you have an adversarial relationship with these community members, you can't do your job. Your job is to solve crimes. You can't do it.
That is a blanket statement. There's no trust. I would
say no trust, not no trust. I don't mean to say no trust.
Thank you.
But here's what you do have. The polls show in the black community, 62% say lack of trust and confidence in police. So that's not everybody by any means, but the majority, a significant majority. But those same communities say they want police in their communities, right? The same at like a 65, 70% rate. It's almost a contradiction, sounds like it, but I think what you're saying, I'm agreeing with you in a lot of ways. What people are saying is, I don't have trust and confidence because I can't turn on the TV without seeing another incident. So that's, of course, going to rob me of a lot of trust and confidence on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't want to be a crime victim. And I want to minimize crime. I'd like to be able to cooperate with police more. I'd like there to be more trust and confidence there. We got to get there somehow. The number one way we got to get there is you got to stop shooting people, on camera under, egregious circumstances that a lot of us look at and drop our jaws at. That just has to end. Now, how that's going to end, police don't seem to have been able to get out of their way from doing that over the last year or so, right? They've been under a microscope. While the Chauvin trial was going on, you had Dante Wright arise.
Exactly.
Let's radically rethink safety and community and get out of a punitive response to our social problems and come up with a non-punitive one.
Well, this has certainly been a lively conversation. Jody Armour, USC law professor and expert scholar on social justice. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Anita Bennett, and this has been LA Currents.